A young boy, thin and frail, walked along a dusty road, carrying a small wooden box filled with trinkets and household goods. His clothes were worn, his shoes barely held together, and his stomach ached with hunger. The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the ground, and the wind carried the scent of fresh bread from a bakery in the distance, making his hunger even harder to bear. Howard was his name. He was a poor boy who had been selling small items from door to door to pay his way through school. That day had been especially hard. Many doors had closed before he could even finish his sentence. Now he had only one thin dime left in his pocket, and his stomach felt hollow. As he approached a small white house with a wooden porch, he decided he would ask for a meal. He took a deep breath and knocked. The door creaked open, and standing before him was a young woman, perhaps just a few years older than him. She had gentle eyes, a kind smile, and golden brown hair. Her dress, though simple, was clean and well kept. Howard hesitated. He had planned to ask for food, but suddenly he felt embarrassed. Instead, he stammered, "May I have a drink of water?" The young woman looked at him closely. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he held his stomach as if trying to quiet the hunger inside him. Instead of just water, she disappeared inside and soon returned with a large glass of fresh milk. "Here," she said softly, handing it to him. Howard took the glass in both hands. He drank it slowly, savoring every sip as if it were the finest meal he had ever had. When he finished, he looked up at her. "How much do I owe you?" he asked hesitantly. The young woman smiled, shaking her head. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Mother taught us never to accept payment for kindness." Howard felt a lump in his throat. No one had shown him such kindness in a long time. He stood up a little straighter and said, "Then I thank you from my heart." As he walked away, his hunger was no longer the only thing that had been satisfied. His heart felt full, his faith in humanity and in God renewed. That simple act of kindness had given him more than just nourishment, it had given him hope. Years passed and the young woman's life changed. She grew older, got married, and built a life in the same quiet town. But one day she fell gravely ill. Her condition worsened quickly, and the local doctors were at a loss. They shook their heads, whispering in hushed voices, unable to find a cure. Her family was heartbroken. Finally, they sent her to a large hospital in the city where the best doctors could examine her. She was placed in a stark white hospital room, the scent of antiseptic lingering in the air. The walls felt cold, and fear settled deep in her heart. A team of specialists gathered to discuss her case. Among them was a respected doctor, Dr. Howard Kelly. When he heard the name of the small town she came from, something stirred inside him. He felt a deep sense of familiarity, though he couldn't quite place why. Curious, he went to see the patient himself. As he stepped into her room, dressed in his long white coat, he recognized her instantly. Though years had passed, he never forgot the kind face of the girl who had once given him a glass of milk when he needed it most. A warmth filled his chest. He knew this was his chance to repay the kindness that had once changed his life. From that day forward, Dr. Howard dedicated himself to her case. He carefully oversaw every aspect of her treatment, checking on her frequently, making sure she received the best care possible. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the woman's health improved. Finally, the day came when she was well enough to go home. She felt relief, but a deep worry still gnawed at her. How would she ever afford the hospital bill? She sat in her hospital bed, hands trembling as she opened the envelope. Her heart pounded. She knew the cost must be enormous, more money than she could ever hope to pay in a lifetime. But as she unfolded the paper, her eyes widened. Written on the side of the bill, in elegant handwriting, were the words, Paid in full with 1 glass of milk. Dr. Howard Kelly. Tears welled up in her eyes as she held the paper close to her chest. She remembered the boy who had stood at her doorstep all those years ago. She had given him a glass of milk without expecting anything in return. Now that simple act of kindness had come back to her in the most unexpected and beautiful way. She whispered a prayer of gratitude, realizing that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. And somewhere in the hospital, Dr. Howard Kelly smiled, knowing he had repaid a debt written not in money, but in the language of the heart.